In Halifax, on Canada's east coast, and in whose waters the Titanic sank, one of the world's most famous train journeys begins. On the Canadian Railway, a journey across the North American continent. The rail connection from east to west, which includes the crossing of the Rocky Mountains, marked the first major construction of a new era. A railroad that stretches for 6,000 kilometres. The journey begins in the ocean. Whilst travelling to the first station on the long journey, the conductor gives a short informative talk on the history of the Canadian Railway. The train has several viewing wagons, as well as a comfortable bar and leisure compartments. Soon we arrive at the first leg of the journey. Ville De Quebec, capital of Canada's likewise named largest province. A majestic and dominant landmark, the world-famous Chateau Frontenac overlooks the Francophile city. The innate art of the city's original inhabitants, the Inuits, still makes its mark today. The funicular travels from the upper town to the lower town, the Petit Champlain Quarter. The illuminated train station is like a palace of a long-forgotten era. In poor weather, the day trip continues to Montreal. Modern train facilities with excellent levels of both service and comfort are the main reason behind Canadian Railway's well-deserved reputation. The massive Basilica of St. Joseph's Oratory is one of the main sites in Canada's second largest city. In 1535, Jacques Cartier occupied this region for the French king, and in 1642, Montreal was established. Today's Montreal is one of the most modern cities in the world, with a fascinating combination of both old and new, including a vast underground city and the old-style home hill, European charm and the American way of life. And soon the journey resumes to Toronto. In the Native American language, Toronto means meeting place. This is exactly the feeling communicated by the capital of the province of Ontario. The entire world seems to be contained within this multicultural city. From the old Fort York, the view pans up to the tallest freestanding building in the world, the CN Tower, from which there are overwhelming views over the city's buildings and Lake Ontario. The Skydome is a massive stadium with an extendable roof that can be opened and closed as necessary. The nostalgic Royal York Hotel is a railway hotel of the old Canadian Pacific Railway Company and a direct underground connection to the train station. the Canadian travels further west. A final glance at the CN Tower, and now the railway adventure can begin. This railroad was one of the most challenging undertakings in the history of the railways. In the dining car, its tables are being prepared for the next meal. Meanwhile, snacks are available. Comfort is second to none. The tracks across the prairie were laid relatively quickly. From their maintenance base in Winnipeg, the railroad construction trains travelled westwards. In 1872, British Columbia joined the Eastern Confederate Provinces on condition that within 10 years, a transcontinental railroad must be built. Not surprisingly, laying the tracks through the Rocky Mountains proved to be extremely difficult, and more than 12,000 workers were required to lay the railroad over Kicking Horse Pass. The Canadian Rocky Mountains are part of a gigantic and breathtaking mountain range, which extends 4,500 kilometres from Alaska to Mexico. The luxurious railway hotel Chateau Lake Louise is a reminder of the glorious, pioneering days of earlier times. These remote areas could only be reached by train. The railroad marked the beginning of Canada's tourist age. The train is ready to leave, and now it must traverse the final mountain stage. Three times a week, the Canadian, over 1 kilometre long and with 2 locomotives and 30 wagons, winds its way westwards to the Pacific coast. By dawn the next day, the train travels alongside the Fraser River. Next, the end of the line, Vancouver. A modern railway station welcomes the well-satisfied passengers. Originally, this city was not destined to be the end point of the railroad. Thus, Vancouver owes its very existence to the railway and has developed into the leading port on North America's west coast. Vancouver, the third largest city in Canada, and surely one of its most beautiful. A dynamic metropolis in a beautiful setting that enjoys not only a mild climate, but also a multicultural ambience. Here the long journey ends. For its new settlers, the railroad was the key to mid and West Canada, thanks to the pioneering spirit of this country's wonderful people.